Hello, nerds!
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 Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds!
Yeah!
I gotta play to my fans, guys.
Oh,
All right.
shit, you got props, Megan. I love it.
Hey, if Erick's got that, I got that.
So here's one of my kids just yelled it from upstairs. So let's get started with some quick introductions, and then we'll jump into reactions to what we just witnessed. But we'll start with you, Megan, since you're first time in the Nerd Zone. Who are you?
First time in the Nerd Zone. Well, thank you, nerds, for having me. I am Meghan Milloy, a good friend, for better or worse, of Erick M. Sanchez down here, who gave me this math hat. My night job, as I call it, I am the co-founder and executive director of Republican Women for Progress. So before y'all hang up on this and panic about Republican, we're the good Republicans. We started in 2016 as Republican Women for Hillary, and then turned into a C4 and a PAC to help elect good women to office. So that's me.
Welcome to the show. Erick, you want to give a quick intro for the few people who may not know who you are?
Well, from September until early February, I was the traveling press secretary to Steve in the state of New Hampshire, officially, but loosely, I was also working for Andrew Yang as his traveling press secretary. But really, I was more focused on Steve than Andrew, but, you know, we figured out who was paying the bill, so that's what happened.
Well, welcome back, Erick, and thank you, by the way, also for helping get Tim Ryan as a guest on the Nerd Show a few months ago. That was awesome. Steve, dude, you are an old timer on this show. This must be like your third or fourth time, right?
It's like the SNL, Tom Hanks thing. I get the jacket and two more.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So who are you, Steve?
Steve Marchand. I live on the beautiful sea coast of New Hampshire in Northampton. I used to be the mayor of Portsmouth, ran for governor in 2018. Breaking news, didn't win, or else I'd have a little title next to my name. Love getting on the Yang Gang train very early. I met him in January of 2019. Loved him. Jumped in early after that. Was there for the whole ride, and I can't wait for the next ride with Andrew Yang.
Oh, well, that's I have a feeling that's coming based on what I saw tonight. I feel like we could use some new leadership, but let's get into the debate we just witnessed, and maybe Megan, start us off. Like, if someone missed the debate and they said, "Oh, did you see it? How was it?" What would you say?
I mean, what do you even say about that? It was out of control. It was a bunch of yelling, and I think it took us a long time to get into it before we heard any actual policy from really either one of them. It's not necessarily Joe Biden's fault. It's because he just couldn't speak over the president. And I think Joe Biden had a mission tonight, and it was to speak directly to the American people. And I think he did a great job of that. The times that you saw him look into the camera, that's what he was doing. I think that will resonate well. I think you hear a lot of people talking about, like, well, that's what Trump's people want. They want to see a strong leader and someone that's going to break the rules. And this isn't that. There's a difference in being a strong leader and being this kind of sweaty, petulant child that's just screaming on national television. So I don't think that's really what Republican voters wanted to see. It was mass chaos.
Erick, how would you describe what we witnessed?
I would agree with Megan entirely with that assessment. I just, every time I watch this and for all of us, obviously, we've seen all sorts of different political discourse, but anytime I see these situations play out, I always think about the new voting generation. I think about the generation that's about to vote, and I think about the task that parents have in telling their kids, yes, this is how we elect a president, and this is the type of situation that we're dealing with right now. So it was as I expected, but also still, upsetting in a lot of ways that this is kind of what we have to face, and the margins that we're looking at this point.
Steve, how did it look from the Granite State?
Man, it doesn't look like the debates that we were watching up here at the end of 2019 and early 2020. And I miss those 10-person stages all of a sudden. I used to think that having 8, 9, 10 people on a stage, there was nothing that could be a worse setup than that. Well, I mean, on one level, clearly we got what I think we kind of expected tonight, which is President Trump is behind. And don't let him fool you. He is behind by more than he was at this point in the 2016 cycle. And whatever bravado he spews, he knows it. He knows it. And he was acting like somebody who knows that he's got to throw a lot of spaghetti on the wall and he's got to find out what sticks, because he's been doing this now for a long time. And he realizes playing the greatest hits from 2016 will not be enough to get to 270. So he's looking for the next thing, and they're willing to try almost anything, and you saw that tonight. So on one level, it's exactly what you would expect, and I think Joe Biden did about as well as you could under the circumstances. There has not been a presidential debate like this in the modern history of debates. Nothing stylistically has looked anything like this. Frankly, this is more chaotic than even the 2016 debates were for the most part. It's another level. But there is one thing I want to play a little devil's advocate, just to put it into the mix. I was watching this with my wife and my oldest daughter, who is 17. My wife is a former Republican turned undeclared turned Democrat. Donald Trump has that way with people. My daughter is a 17-year-old flaming liberal, and I'm a pretty progressive guy myself. So that's the three of us watching. And I'm thinking to myself, we are so focused on the millions of people in this country who would like to just have boring for a while. But I also want to throw out the possibility that there may be many, many millions of people, including some who aren't thrilled with Trump and are kind of thinking about what life after Trump will look like, who may have seen the vice president and said, you know what? After 4 years of Donald Trump, I would prefer crazy, like wild, with having your act together. But man, that'd be a pretty boring 4 years. And I think that it's possible that Donald Trump has created a baseline of what we sort of are expecting from the president now, that the idea of not having 3 crazy, interesting stories every day to deal with may actually, for some people, be uncomfortable in its own way. And I look back at the 2016 debates. I watched some of them before tonight. And I realized that there are things that I was criticizing Trump's performance back in 2016 that in hindsight clearly were at least somewhat more effective than I was giving credit for at the time. And I'm trying really hard in these debates like tonight to make sure that I'm not making the same mistake again. I think he was awful, but I kind of want to sleep on it and maybe watch it again before I feel like I would bet a mortgage payment that he actually was as awful as I think he is.
It is possible that we're in our own echo chamber, and maybe half the country thought that Trump crushed it. I will say my reaction was the first thing. I knew it was going to be entertaining because it's politics and it's Trump. But the sad thing was the word that comes to mind was embarrassed. I was sitting there with my 10-year-old and 12-year-old. And I was telling them at dinner, we were getting really excited. It was like the pregame, we had our Pizza Hut. We were fired up, ready to go. And I said, "You guys are going to watch history being made. Like this is how we're going to decide who our leader is." And halfway through, with all of the interruptions and the yelling, I literally had to say, "Guys, maybe this isn't really good for you to watch," because I didn't want them to sort of have this behavior modeled for them, because this is not what we teach them at home, how to interact with other people, even when you disagree with them. And I kind of feel a little bit sad for anyone watching, because I feel like our politics has been degraded. And it wasn't like some crazy fringe candidate. This was the president of the United States of America. that literally doesn't understand about time, keeping the time. He seemed to not understand that just because you don't go last doesn't mean you didn't get to speak. When there's two segments, the person who goes first, that's it. And so like he just seemed to struggle with basic decorum. And maybe you're right, Steve, that his supporters like that about him. But I wonder, and I'd be curious to get, maybe we'll start with your thoughts, Meghan. Do you feel like there will be any impact on Trump's base? Or do you think maybe Steve's theory is right, that this is what they want? They want what they got, what they wanted.
Yeah, so I think, and to your first point, I actually heard from a number of my friends during the debate that were kind of these suburban women voters, either current or previous Republicans, that had their kids in the room, and it was really the first debate that their kids were old enough to watch and understand. And some of them had kids that are just like, they can recite all the presidents from first to 45th and not have any pause, like really into this sort of stuff. And they had to do the same thing. They pulled them out of the room because they didn't think it was good for them to watch. And I don't think it was just about keeping time, but it was just manners and actual politeness and human decency. And that's something that we've seen on a number of occasions that the president lacks. I do think Trump said it best himself. He said that he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and his base would still support him. Like, he's got that base. Nothing's going to change that. He could go up and throat punch Joe Biden and they would root for him, right? But I do think, and we hear so much about this kind of 10 to 15% of moderate Republican voters, especially these suburban women voters, educated, maybe held their nose and voted for him in 2016, but have some concerns. That's not what they wanted to see. These are the women that are pulling their kids out of the living room because they were embarrassed to have them watch the president of the United States. And, I think those are the voters that these campaigns, both of them, should be focusing on. And I think Joe Biden did a great job of speaking to them, especially when speaking about the economy, his plans for recovery, and how the president has so poorly mismanaged the COVID crisis. So, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I just don't think that this is what's speaking to those kind of swing voters in the middle.
Eric, what's your read on those undecideds? Do you think some of them were moved, or do you think they're just going to kind of wait out a couple more debates?
Well, at least I believe it was a Washington Post poll that I read that said 75% of Americans said they would be watching tonight's debate. And of that, 3% said that the impact of this debate would persuade them to vote in one direction or another. I think back to number one, what Andrew said in either the first or second debate about how all the candidates would go wake up and they'd go out and pretty much act as part of a reality television show. And I think about, our experiences on the trail. And one of my favorite were the debate walkthroughs that we would have before these debates. And you'd see different things get together. They'd get on that stage before the real thing started. Someone hold up ties for their candidates to make sure that they reflected best off of those backgrounds. At the end of the day, like, the way that I think about it is all political theater. Now, that's not to put any absence towards the impact of seeing this type of performance, because leadership takes many different formats. At the same time, I don't feel like these debates will ultimately be a swing in the pendulum that is the election, unless there's one major gaffe or one big opening. But I think ultimately, if you're a Biden fan, you're going to say after this debate that Biden was a winner. If you're a Trump fan, you're going to say that Trump was a winner. If you're undecided, you're probably looking at this and saying, I really need some more clarity because this is crazy. I think that's the easiest way of assessing this. But, it's made so much harder with this COVID cloud, the capability of candidates to campaign naturally. So, I think in this year more than ever, these rare glimpses of seeing these candidates interact offer more than we've been able to see we were able to see in cycles and primaries previously.
Steve, net effect plus Biden plus Trump, or a push?
I think it's largely a push because I think this is overwhelmingly a base election. And if you're Donald Trump, and this is something that I think the Democratic Party has to think about quite a bit in general. But it gets masked by the fact that Trump is this dominant personality, so we focus on the shiny object. Is the gender gap is now expanding beyond just among white voters, to the point now where the Republican Party is actually dominant with white males, but actually making significant inroads with non-white males as well. Whereas Democrats are now doing the same thing with white women. Trump won white women in 2016. Biden is doing extremely well with white women relative to Hillary in 2020. It is not about whether the candidate is male or female so much at this point. It is Democrats are branded successfully with women in a way that is making them dominant, whether it's white or non-white women. And the Republican Party is doing the same with men. And so if you're Donald Trump, and I look at this, it is clear that he's going to lose some votes net in 2020 relative to 2016 with white women. At this point, it seems highly unlikely that he could make up the gap that he's experiencing relative to 4 years ago. So he's got to find it somewhere else if he's going to come back and win. And even though he's crazy and he does all this stuff on the stage, his people are thinking like this. And I believe there are two audiences that he's looking at, that if you're thinking about, oh, well, this is how I think of it. If you're Donald Trump, here are the two kinds of people that he's got to get continuing to move in his direction if he's going to make up this gap I'm describing. One is black men. If you look at it, and this is getting in Wonkyville, but this is the nerd zone. In 2008, Barack Obama won 93% of black men vote. Mm-hmm. In 2012, Barack Obama won 87% of the black male vote. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won only 80% of the male black vote. From 08 to 16, it went from 93% to 80%. And while 80% is still an enormous number, when you have a coalition that is dependent on overwhelming electoral success among non-white voters in order to win national elections, going from 93 to 80, and there is some evidence in national polls that despite some of the racist language used by Trump, he is continuing to work on making inroads with the Latino and black male populations. The other population, and this is what I think about tonight, trying to put myself in the shoes here about the net effect. Mm-hmm. The largest number of registered voters who did not vote in 2016 were white men with a high school degree or less. When you look at the place where there's the greatest opportunity for growth among already registered voters, and you look at who those people, if they come out to vote, overwhelmingly would be likely to vote for, it would be Donald Trump would get a field day off of non-college educated white men. And if you look at Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, he's got to make sure he can hold on to Ohio, parts of rural North Carolina, the Panhandle in Florida. We can go through all of this. If he's looking to flip Nevada, which is sort of sneaky hanging around, trying to flip Minnesota, which may or may not be hanging around. I think that's a little more urban legend than reality. But if you look at all that, that would be the key to that. And so I think that the question I ask myself is he making inroads on a night like tonight with non-college educated white men and with black men? I'll put it this way. I don't know how much progress he made tonight, but I also don't think that he denigrated his chance yet. I think it may be an opportunity lost for him tonight to make inroads with those two groups, but I do not think it is yet gone, and that these next two debates and what might happen the next 5 weeks still present an opportunity for him to make the inroads in those two groups that he's going to have to if he's going to come back and win the election.
Wait, Steve, can I ask you a question? I don't want to interrupt and be the fake moderator that Donald Trump was.
No. It's all good.
I feel like he had two really big statements that I think would speak to the non-white voter community. One was when he called racial bias training racist, which is outrageous. And two, when he just outright refused to call out white supremacy. And not only did he refuse to call it out, he basically was like, stand by all you, what do they say, Proud Boys? I don't know what term
Proud Boys.
It sounded like Proud Boys.
These are two, I think, just outrageous things. And again, only how many, whatever number of voters watch the debates and really dig into debates like we nerds do. But you have to think to some extent that those statements and sentiments are going to get blown up and blown out if I think the Biden campaign is really trying to focus on those groups too.
It totally makes sense. The reason why maybe I'm scarred by the 2016 experience and thus so reluctant to connect dots that seem so obviously connectable. But this is the guy who said when he went down the escalator in 2015, talked about the rapists and the killers that Mexico is sending. They're not sending their best, all that kind of stuff. And there are polls that show him getting 35 to 40% of the Latino vote and certainly in certain states and in some national polls. I mean, so there is an economic element that I think is overlaying. And I will say, and I don't think this came up tonight at all, because the nature of the structure, the non-structure of the 100 minutes is I do think that and I've seen this in my own polling, in my own races here in New Hampshire, and it is not a compliment to men, to be honest with you. This is not the male 49% here, our shining moment. But it does appear that men are more influenced for voting for a male candidate than women are for voting for a female candidate, to the extent that is a factor in how people decide how they're going to vote. Trump's, quote, bravado does seem to have a certain appeal for a certain segment. That part I don't think is ethnic or race related at all, but male, that clearly is not resonating with large segments of women voters. And the other thing I'd say is this is complicated, right? Like we everybody that tries to evaluate it tries to put large swaths, 10, 30, 50% of the population into a couple of adjectives that can neatly describe their voting behavior. But we're all individuals and we all have our own economic story. One thing that happened tonight, the most emotional moment for my family tonight, my mother-in-law died of COVID on August 30th. My wife and we were out in Kansas City, where my in-laws live. She was 77 years old. She didn't leave the house since mid-March. She did everything you're supposed to do. She took it extremely seriously. But unfortunately, it came into the house in a pre-symptomatic fashion. It nearly killed my father-in-law. It did kill my mother-in-law. And so when Donald Trump tonight says, hey, look, it turns out that if you're older and you have, high blood pressure or you have heart problems, it's really bad. But if you're a kid, it's not bad at all. And the way that came across, we all got spontaneously emotional because as Joe Biden looked in the camera right after and said, some of you have an empty chair tonight. Remember he said that? Yeah. That's us. We got an empty chair. And the rage that we felt at that moment, because we felt like the president was flippant about it and did not do everything he could to minimize the chance of such deaths happening. And I do feel like Joe Biden's greatest strength is his empathy. And I feel like that was arguably his best moment of the night. And I know in my household, it was a very personal and effective moment.
Well, I know everybody watching this, Steve, sends their condolences to your family. I'm so sorry to hear about that affecting you so closely. And then to have to watch the president talk about it that way, I'm sure I can't imagine how that must have felt. Let me ask everybody, let's shift gears for a second. We've been talking a lot about Trump. He does consume a lot of the oxygen in the room. There was another guy in this debate. I don't know if you noticed. There were two people. And the guy on the right-hand side,
Chris Wallace?
Yeah, apparently it was like a mannequin. But I'll share my thoughts, and then would love to hear Meghan, Eric, and Steve what you guys thought. I thought that Biden did fine. I certainly think he beat the expectations that sort of were set for him by the Trump kind of campaign. But I also did feel like there were times where when he was being interrupted, like he had that kind of deer in the headlights look, and that was just the optics of it. and there were other times where he would not have a very clean train of thought. And I wonder, do you think that hurt him at all, Meghan, or do you think all of the attention was on Trump, so Biden doesn't really matter what he did? What do you think was the outcome for Biden?
I think to some extent that's going to play into Trump's base with the whole Sleepy Joe comment. But on the other hand, I think that his self-control was very presidential. Like the fact that he didn't just start screaming back at Trump, I thought that was presidential. I think he had enough jabs when he told him, "Shut up, man," and clown. I kind of wanted to see a little bit of that, Joe. I'm glad that he didn't escalate things, because I think he had the potential to, and he steered clear of that. Because as I said, I don't think that that's the sort of presidential candidate that kind of these swing voters want to see. But I do think he had some really good answers to questions once he was finally able to get some airtime. I think he had a great answer on the K-shaped recovery. That was my final bingo check on my bingo card tonight, was the K-shaped recovery. I thought he had some really good answers on COVID. And as I said before, I think he did a really great job of speaking to the American people and not just kind of, answering to the little crowd that was there in the audience. So yes and no. I mean, it's hard to tell. I think we'll see what happens in the second and third debates if they happen. Well, now that he kind of knows how this is going to work and how they're going to feed off of each other. But I don't know. It's tough to say. That's the $1 million question, I guess.
Eric, how would you grade Vice President Biden's performance?
I would say I would give it, if I had on a 1 to 10 scale, I would give it a 6. I think that, obviously, I feel like maybe the charge was for him to keep it measured, for him to, act and look presidential, which is obviously important, especially when you're debating someone who has never exhibited any act of looking presidential. But at the same time, I think if you're an undecided voter, you want to be able to see someone who can cut through the fat. And, I would hope that, at least for his prep and future debates, he can find opportunities for him to interject, for him to take some of those more poignant jabs, because, you've had a president who has relied on an echo chamber that will foster his fallacies. And I think for Biden, the Biden camp, looking toward the next debate, they really need to do a more concerted job of basically myth-busting things as they happen. One of the disappointments when we were talking about like COVID and the spatial need, to not bring up Herman Cain in that opportunity, I think was a lost one. To not bring up certain facets of other pieces, I feel like were lost ones. But it's also really hard doing working through debate after a certain point. You have to walk away from your candidate, let them have the space that they need to understand their charges in the way that their style personally works. I was never involved in Andrew's debate, but I previously worked for Tim Ryan before Andrew. I was involved in that debate prep, and it's really hard. I compared it to studying for an exam that just didn't exist. And there's also variables that you can't account for, counterattacks and all that stuff. And even with Donald Trump, he seems relatively predictable, but at the same time, he does have a way in terms of being able to regurgitate the talking points well and really stick to them in a way that makes his base feel like he's demonstrating some form of leadership. So, he's not an easy debater, obviously, as we saw tonight. I think that's just something to anticipate for the next round.
Steve?
Yeah, I think Joe Biden did well. I mean, if 538.com, their percent chance of who will win the election, I believe it's around 83% right now is what they say are the chances Biden will win. And that would be the equivalent in football, roughly, of a team being up by, say, 21-10 late in the third quarter. They're very likely to win, but you still imagine scenarios where if they get too conservative too quickly, they could allow the other team back in the game. That's sort of where we're at right now, where he didn't fumble tonight. I don't recall a single moment where Joe Biden said anything that I would consider cringeworthy, a gaffe. I didn't see a moment like that. And and he's ahead by a comfortable margin. So by definition, that's a pretty good night for any candidate who's up by 7 points and doesn't really have a cringy moment at all. That's pretty good. I do think, look, I've been on TV debates as a candidate. And I've been on ones with more than two candidates, and I've been on ones that were one-on-one. And they are completely different exercises. Because on a one-on-one debate, it is very easy to interject. It becomes a real debate most of the time because it's one person that says something. What do you think of what he or she just said? And what Joe Biden just spent, many, many months doing is getting involved in debates that were, with the exception of that final one right before COVID really cracked down, the Bernie Joe one-on-one. Most of the rest had anything from 7 to 10 candidates on that stage. That's not really a debate in the way we talk about debates for the most part. I did get to do some debate prep with Andrew. The best one was in Detroit, where that was the one where he really broke out. He had kind of a, at best, uneven first debate in June, you might recall.
And
he had a pressure. We kind of felt like if he didn't have a significantly better debate in July, we were worried that he was going to be out because he wasn't going to make subsequent debate stages. The fundraising would dry up, and he would, it wouldn't work out. It was difficult to play. I played Michael Bennett. I played Jay Inslee. I got to play two different candidates.
I played Julian Castro. not in that round, but for Tim Ryan.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, there you go. But it was tough because you didn't know who you might have a chance to take a jab at because there were 9 other people on the stage. Mm-hmm. Talk about not having didn't even know what the test looked like, right? Like Eric said. So I think that Biden will actually look quite a bit different in the second debate because he will have now experienced the Donald Trump one-on-one experience. Don't forget, Barack Obama in 2012 got absolutely pulverized by Mitt Romney in the first debate and then came back and had 2 excellent debates. I think that if you looked at Hillary versus Donald and their 3 debates in 2016, I would argue that Trump actually got better as the debates went on because I think for him it was the first time he had ever done a one-on-one debate. And this is hard. It's a foreign experience. So I thought Biden did just fine for what he needed to do. He's up 7. He didn't do anything bad. Trump had a few cringy moments. Biden's probably not going to lose any of that 7-point deficit lead because of tonight. And I think he actually will be better in a couple of weeks from having gone through tonight relatively unscathed.
All right. Well, let me ask the audience in the live chat if they have any questions. And then while they're typing them in, let me ask each of our panelists, what do you think was the best and worst moment for each participant in this debate? And I'll start us off. I think on Biden's side, the best moment, basically when he spoke to the camera and said, look, this guy's a liar. He has no plan. And he was just sort of connecting. I thought that really was effective. I think his worst was when he would pause whenever Trump interrupted him. And there were times where he kind of didn't look like he was, as in control, didn't project strength. And then for Trump, I think his best moment, he was a pretty tough one around why won't you say the words law enforcement, or what did Hunter get the $3.3 million for? I mean, I know those are just kind of like BS attacks, but I think his base really likes that kind of stuff. And then Trump's worst moment was pretty much the first half of the debate. Whenever Wallace had to correct him, he said, and when Wallace was saying, Mr. President, please stop. I think actually that made him look kind of diminished. But Megan, what was your highs and lows for each?
I think there were so many on each. I think Joe Biden had a really good moment when Donald Trump was bringing up his son, Hunter, well, both sons really, and he looked straight into the camera and was like, look, it's not about my family. It's not about his family. It's about your families. And I think that was his mission, was to speak to the American families tonight. And I think that did a very good job. I think, like you, there were a number of moments, especially in the first few minutes when everyone was trying to get their footing under them, when he could have interrupted or at least kind of expressed a little more force towards Trump and didn't. I think that will come back to haunt him. For Trump, God, all of it. I think his best, he did have a good line when he was talking about how the shutdown of businesses and restaurants and states and cities has impacted various communities in terms of drug and alcohol abuse. I think that's a point that does get overlooked in all of this, and I think that will speak to a decent amount of voters. And it was one of the few times that he was seemingly having a little bit of compassion. I think his worst was when he failed to condemn white supremacists. I mean, it's like that should be
right
for him to do, and he still continues to not do it. And I think that's just outrageous.
Do you think that was premeditated? Do you think he was like purposely not condemning white supremacists?
I mean, I don't know. He did kind of fumble with his words a little bit when Joe pushed back. And so I don't think it was premeditated. I think that he's just that bad of a person deep down that is his natural reaction. Like it's shocking.
Yeah. All right. Eric, what about you, sir? What did you think of the highs and lows?
I would agree with Megan's point on Trump's worst moment. Obviously the way that he has handled the alt-right in general has been something that has been alarming to every single American, and the way that he in some ways is even quietly excited was terrible. I think Trump's best moment, to be honest, happened before the debate even started. It started with his tweet calling for a drug test. And as I saw the pre-debate coverage cascaded throughout his surrogates, where they were basically creating this narrative where, this debate was Joe Biden's to lose, that he was going to crush it, and all those other pieces, because I know that they were relying on Biden having a less than perfect or even just a mediocre or best performance. And I think that coordinated effort was something, to understand, and at least for like communicators like me, where we try to manage expectations, something that I consider to be a huge victory for them. I think for Biden, his general empathy, I think has always been his biggest strength. It was certainly his biggest strength during his tenure as vice president. It rang throughout his campaign. It happened tonight on the debate stage, and I give him a lot of credit for that. I think in terms of his biggest area for improvement, it is in some ways, and whether he wants to or not. And I think, if Andrew was on that debate stage, he would just be able to figure out a way to play his game by not playing his game, but also work to run circles in terms of using wit combined with, some of his theatrics, but to his advantage. And I think at a certain point, you have to play that game whether you want to or not, because that's just how Trump will play it.
Steve?
Biden's best moments were the ones when he looks into the camera and he basically makes it feel like it's you and him. And then there's this other guy, Trump, over here. Like, forget about him. I'm talking to you, to Megan's point a moment ago. He should do more of that. And in fact, that may be one of the ways to circumvent Trump's theatrics, is to simply kind of do his thing.
Ignore him. Yeah.
Okay. Donald, Mr. President. Hey, it's you and me now. And because when he looks at the camera, he's got the look. He's got the empathy factor. I mean, the whole thing. I'll tell you one thing I did that made me wince a little bit, because I do think it's a base election. I think there are other ways that he could have dealt with the Green New Deal questions rather than to crap on it. I've got friends of mine on social media who basically were like, are you trying? I'm going to vote for you, okay? I know that you know that I'm going to vote for you, Joe, no matter what you say. You could change your party registration, and I'm going to vote for you because you're not Trump. But, man, do you have to make it harder? And for a significant part of the base, there are ways he could have said, look, I am not a co-signer on the Green New Deal. There are things about the spirit of it that I think are right on. We need to be very aggressive about climate change. There is an opportunity for this to be a huge winner economically. There are some details on it that, frankly, I do not sign up for. But I do have the Biden plan. And it's going to take all of us to get where we need to go on environmental and so. But instead, it was just like, no, man, I don't go for that socialist Green New Deal. Like, really? I'm like, come on, no. So that's the best of Biden is it's just you and me. The worst of it is like you don't need to crap on the progressive base just because they're going to vote for you anyway. That we got to get every vote we can. We need young voters to be excited, and they, that was not helpful for Donald Trump. I think his best moments, and I think Tom, you touched on this. Anytime that the moderator, almost like a boxing match, when he gets the opponent in the corner. He has a really good ability to not let him out of the corner. And the only way that the opponent, in this case Biden, gets out of the corner is basically if they have incredible wit, which Biden's a lot of things, but I'm not sure that's his strength. Or if the referee, in this case Chris Wallace, basically says, okay, we're going to stop it. Like all the stuff about Biden, $3.5 million with the Russian mayor's wife, the Moscow mayor's wife. And he said it like 5 times. And then he's like, so are you going to pack the court? Are you going to pack the court? And Biden's like, I'm not going to answer it. And you see Trump grinning because that's a win for Trump, that moment. That was not a good moment for Joe Biden. There are other ways to answer that. So whenever Trump is able to get you in the corner and he could smell it, he has such good instincts for that, and just pound you in the corner by asking the same question 8 times. Most of us would stop after 2 times. Because there's 100 million people watching and we don't want to sound like a dick. But that's not, he doesn't care. He gets it. He's like, I'm not going to stop punching you until the referee calls it out or you give up. And that's pretty effective at those moments. And the worst thing about Donald Trump is almost everything else because he turns off anybody who's not part of the 42%.
Yeah.
He makes it so hard to get from 42 to 47. And I swear, if you had somebody with almost the exact same policies, who was just 80% as much of a dick, I think that person would win. But Trump just can't. His personality gets him to 42, but it doesn't look like he can get him to 47, which he doesn't need 51. If he can get to 47, he probably would win the election. And it's I don't see how he gets there. He's losing just enough, especially among white women, that I think it's gonna be real tough for him. And it's because the rest of the debate, he's just too much of a dick.
Yeah, I think he crossed the line from bully, which nobody likes, but some people kind of admire, to real dick, right? I mean, he just had the dick factor, and it was too much.
I mean, we're being flippant with the language, but there's a line there. And people, you can be pretty. I mean, you can punch somebody in the corner for a long time in a debate. Like you can go at it, but
you don't bite their ear off.
Right. He didn't go that far with Tyson. Right. He didn't go to Holyfield bad. And he's just going over the line, and it's just pissing off enough people more than 2016.
Yeah.
Just enough that it's hard to see the path unless something happens that, well, who knows? Things are happening I never thought would happen.
Megan, you want to get in?
I actually was talking to a friend about this during the debate. So not Trump. There was a Fox News host. Granted, he's the same Fox News host as the moderator. And all of these Trump-based stands are seeing kind of their Fox News guy at many points really putting Trump in a corner and like scolding him. Do y'all think that moves the needle at all in terms of like, ooh, wait, this is our guy, like scolding our other guy? How does that play into the base at all? Or does it? Does that matter? Like, do they not put 2 and 2 together?
I have some MAGA family. I was chatting with them about this before the debate, and they have said that Wallace is not a real Republican, that he's something happened to him. And so he's part of the fake news. Now but they're also watching OAN now, and like Fox is too liberal for them now. So, yeah. But I don't know. I feel like his base will not be at all influenced by Wallace holding Trump to task.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Well, Eric and Steve, do you think Wallace will influence some of the Trump supporters?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And at the same time, just taking a step back and moving away from this question just for a second, I think that any of us, particularly that worked on the Yang campaign, have MAGA family. We had an overwhelming amount of Trump supporters who decided to take a leap of faith towards Andrew, who was running in a Democratic primary, because they saw a different alternative. And that alternative spoke to things that Trump said he would fix, but ultimately didn't offer a solution to those things. And Andrew offered plans to help fix that. And I think it's hard for us to just sit here and talk about these two different components without thinking about that just a little bit, just because I feel like, generally for voters and for us inside the bubble, it's something for us to acknowledge and kind of consider. So, in terms of Wallace playing a role in this election, I feel like, he certainly did a very great job tonight of being as unbiased as he certainly could have been. I'm eager to see what the other moderators decide to offer, but ultimately, I'm more in tune and at least hopeful that the candidates will work towards solving solutions instead of getting into what I would consider these petty pissing matches. I think that's the hardest part.
So speaking of the Yang family, like there, for sure, I agree with you, Eric. There are a lot of Trump's voters who decided to support Yang, and now they feel like they are sort of without a home because they can't, they see what we see, the concerns we have about Trump, but then they look at Biden and he's the opposite of Yang. He's been in DC for a long time. He's older. He doesn't actively support UBI. Not a lot of brand new policy innovations. Steve, what do you think about these Trump voters who don't quite want to go for Trump, but they really find Biden to be two wings of the same bird kind of thing?
Well, first, I don't think Wallace has any impact on people. I don't think they see him as like, it's Tucker Carlson or bust kind of thing.
Yeah, Hannity.
Like that. So, Hannity I don't think they'll see him as that. By the way, if I'm, I believe, is it Steve Scully, the C-SPAN anchor? Do I have that right? He's going to moderate one of the next two debates, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. I am imagining him doing the morning show, on C-SPAN. I hope he is working out. I don't even know. I hope he has an earpiece and is using PEDs. Maybe I hear that's the thing, because his TV personality is extremely mild mannered, like unusually so. I mean, it's C-SPAN. Like he's chill by C-SPAN standards.
Yeah.
And I can't. At this moment, the idea of if somebody like that had been the moderator of tonight's debate. What does that look like? I mean, I just fear that Donald Trump would drive over that moment like a giant truck. I mean, he would annihilate it. So that's the moderator matters a lot when you're dealing with the Donald Trump debate. And I think we have to think about that and kind of put that in almost the way that the bettors, the gamblers, will see who the NFL referees are going to be, and that actually is part of how they figure out like who calls the most penalties, stuff like that's that. And then in terms of the Yang, about 40% of Yang supporters, by some polling, said that they would not support or would be highly unlikely to support the Democratic nominee if it was not Andrew Yang. And that number dwarfed any of the final 8 to 10 candidates that were in the field. Tulsi had some of that going on, but among the final candidates, nobody was like that. I mean, even Bernie was half or less of that number. And to be honest, I do think a lot of Yang voters will have a very difficult time sticking with Biden. And I kind of feel like if I were Joe Biden, and we're clearly a biased audience here, I would try to find ways to use Andrew over the final weeks in strategic ways to have him speak to kind of Trumpish demographics. And by the way, not for nothing, it is so frustrating after having worked with Andrew for so long that we had another debate where I forget the moment, but both candidates talked about, hey, I'm worried about all Americans, white people, black people, Latino people. Like, the fastest growing non-white population is not either. It's Asian American, and Asian Americans get the least political attention in terms of investment to grow partisan support and turnout operations relative to Latino or black or even most segments of white population, and vote heavily for Democrats with a modicum of additional investment of time and resources. I think there's tremendous opportunity for either party to do something there. But it's another night where I'm like, man, just ignoring an entire fastest growing segment of the American population.
Yep. I've seen that before and sadly was not surprised, but let's jump to a bunch of audience questions. Why don't we do this for each one? We'll take 2 answers. Whoever 2 of the 3 of you feels the most passionate about it. Anybody feel passionate about Trump's comments on the 80 million mail-in ballots? There were stories of people say there were ballots found in a waste paper basket. I heard about this. Anybody want to talk about that?
I think this is, I'll just say, Trump's has started this narrative that no matter what, ballots will be illegit and all these other pieces. It's just his way of trying to discredit an outcome that might not play out in his favor and trying to manage those expectations. And in a scenario where he wins, he'll say that all the ballots were legit, just like he always does about anything he ever talks about. Either it just whatever happens, he manages expectations so it'll suit his favor, or play into the fact that he wasn't able to make it happen. So that's how I feel about his comments there.
Yeah.
Can I just say?
Go.
I'm sorry, Megan. I think you're
No, all you.
This is the scariest. I am the most scared of this of anything on election night. We know this. Every poll shows this. Upwards of 60% of likely Biden voters plan on voting before election day. Mm-hmm. A similar reverse percentage of likely Trump voters plan on voting in person on election day. In virtually every state that will be decided by 5 points or less, we need to be ridiculously prepared that whoever is ahead on the basis of day of voting, in-person voting, is a different person from who will win the election once you wait a week. In Kentucky, remember that Amy McGrath-Charles Booker primary? Booker came on late, the young, very exciting state representative, young black candidate who really got fire. McGrath spent $30 million and kind of And Booker came on, and on the day of voting, he was ahead by like 6 points. And he ended up losing by like 6 points. And we pretty much all knew, but they didn't add any votes until a week after. That's the way they did it in Kentucky. This is going to happen all over the place. And if we know this, and this is what tonight was all about, it is awful. And you can see this train coming down the track a mile away. Trump knows it. This is a strategy for election night. And I'm very concerned about what the first couple weeks in November are going to look like in this country.
Yeah, maybe the president will reactivate the Commission on Election Integrity that he started in 2017 with the 5 million votes that were supposedly fake votes. It is sad.
What's the guy's name? Kobach? Chris Kobach? What's the guy's name?
Yeah, I think so.
Kansas? He was the
Kansas guy.
Yeah, get ready. He's coming. He's going to be on TV a lot in November.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very sad.
I just want to say, completely unrelated to this discussion, Andrew just had a great tweet where he said everyone who watched that debate deserves $1,000 a month, and I could not agree more.
That would have been a good closing statement. All right, here's the next question. Should Biden do another debate?
I think he has to. I mean, this is going to play into Trump's whole thing about he's Sleepy Joe. He's hiding in the basement. He's senile and unhealthy and unfit to be president if he doesn't come out there. I think that, it's worth it for him. Like, as we discussed, now that he's seen how this works, how Trump operates, I think he'll be prepared to be more of an attack dog in the next one. But he's certainly, because that if he says he's not going to do the rest of the debates, Trump's going to have some grand showing where he shows up at the debate venue and is like by himself and is, just making some bullshit show like he always does. The one thing he's good at is TV, and that's debatable. But that's what it would be. So I think he has to.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
All right, Megan, this one's just for you. I don't know if your shirt gives away the answer, but I believe you're going to be voting for Joe and Kamala.
I don't know about Meghan Milloy, but Meghan Milloy will be voting for.
That's right, your cousin Milloy.
Yeah, my cousin.
All right. Hey, speaking of Kamala, do you guys have any predictions on the vice presidential debates? What do you think is going to happen?
I think Kamala's going to absolutely eat Mike's lunch. The guy could not be more milquetoast, and Kamala is an incredible debater. We saw it throughout the primary, so without question, I think it's going to be a Kamala sweep.
I just hope that Mike Pence is able to get permission to be in the same room as a woman from his wife without her being there. But yeah, she's a debater by training and a debater by this is what she's done her entire career, and I think she's just going to bulldoze it. My one concern for some of these swing voters is that she's going to almost come out too hot because she knows her stuff so well. She has the bigger personality. And I think that's going to be the challenge, is how does she find that happy medium of being the best debater on that stage by a mile, but not just railroading Mike Pence for everything he's got.
I mean, to Steve's point, I could imagine there are some undecided male voters who will not respond well to Kamala crushing Pence. Yeah,
that's the concern.
She's the most talented politician of the four, and she's the best debater of the four, and she's the most dynamic of the four, and frankly, she looks the most like the future of America, visually, of the four. I mean, she's just more interesting. I mean, Trump is interesting in the way only he can be, but in the way that we think of interesting that has a positive connotation, more like stopping to look at a really cool mountain range, not like rubbernecking to look at an accident. That's what I mean. She's really good like that. She's an extremely talented person, and obviously it didn't work out for her as a presidential candidate. But you know what? I think there's a humility that comes through a process where you are used to winning and then you don't win, that actually over time makes you better. And I think in her case, she'll have had the spring and summer to kind of learn from her own 2020 presidential experience. She's already got the goods. She's fit. She's very talented. And I think that we're going to see her at an even higher level than we saw in some of her best presidential candidate moments because of that time to reflect and learn from experience.
Well, Steve, I'd also say I would submit that she's also the most interesting because she's the only one of the four that isn't an old white dude.
Totally.
That's what a lot of America, I think, wants to see.
And that's what I mean. That when I think about the future of the country, there's the idea that, think of it this way: before Biden was the nominee, and of course until 2 weeks before Super Tuesday, honestly, when Yang, I had to introduce Yang in New Hampshire, and knowing he was going to drop out, but you have to use verb tenses really carefully so that you're not giving it away, right? So you're being conscious. You say he comes up, and you know what's happening. And then I thought for sure that Biden was going to drop out that night when I had found out that he didn't even, I don't believe he cracked 10% in New Hampshire after really kind of flaming out in Iowa as well. It looked like we were going to have somebody, well, I guess we're Bernie. But before Biden, the last time that we had a white dude as the Democratic nominee for president was 2004. I mean, it was kind of a Back to the Future thing to get Biden, but Harris clearly much more represents the future demographically of the country and the reality of the Democratic Party. And I think that she has an opportunity to really excite the Democratic base in a way that Joe just doesn't really have that.
I tend to agree with all of you on Harris. I do worry a little bit that in the expectations game, the expectations are pretty high for her and pretty low for Mike. I mean, it could be, who knows, right? I mean, if Mike has a little bit of a better night and maybe Harris has an off night, it could be a big story. I don't know. We'll see.
Pence will be fine. I mean, I think he spews hate. I can't stand him. But in terms, like, he is the definition of a generic politician, extremely experienced, pretty unflappable in terms of his demeanor, like almost to a fault. Well, to a fault. If you ever want to see somebody getting the crap knocked out of them and still acting the whole time like it's all good, watch him. This is before he is the vice presidential nominee. Going on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. This is in 2018, 2019, and it was the Religious Restoration Act or something, and it was hot stuff, and it was about like whether or not a baker could refuse to make a cake for a gay couple that was going to get married. And so Stephanopoulos basically takes 8 minutes to be like, "You're an idiot, right? No, you're an idiot, right?" And he's like, and it's amazing. It was amazing to watch him for 8 minutes just act like it's all good, even though he became a sound like it was the biggest train wreck I had seen that year. There's a skill to when you're getting pummeled and still kind of able to visually look like you're keeping it real. And I think he's pretty good at that, which may minimize the damage if indeed Kamala is on fire, rocking it out. He's not doing well. He'll still visually look like it's not so bad.
All right. Last comment here from the audience. Jennifer Montgomery, she says, if Biden sits out of debates, they'll just turn into these huge Trump rallies. Speaking of Trump's rallies, I've been pretty impressed. I've seen some pictures of the crowds he's getting to show up. Do you feel like we might be underestimating kind of the support for the president, or do you think that's just the hardcore, 20% that go to the rallies?
Hey, if I had a place where I could show up without a mask and I was encouraged to do by the president of the United States, lacking the intelligence of responding to science, I'd probably show up to that too. I don't think it's indicative of any enthusiasm. I think it's indicative of a president who's ignorant of the safety of American people.
I agree. And I think that, there is a huge swath of the Republican Party and of these moderate kind of swing voters that by definition, moderates aren't going to be hooting and hollering at a rally like these Trump ones or driving their jet ski through a boat parade in Miami. Just not what folks do. And so, I do think it is just kind of that 20%. But, again, we have been wrong before. So here's hoping we're not wrong again.
Remember, 42% of a really big country is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, he's good at that, but it's not the 42% that's really the question. The question is, can he get from 42 to about 47? And specifically, can he get non-college educated white men that are registered but didn't vote? If he can drag them out in a way that's underrepresented in polling, and I don't believe that's the case, by the way, that would be the one scenario where I could see that there's there's like that hidden Trump vote that you hear about. I think that's largely a fallacy. It's just, 42% of a big country is going to be a lot of people.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up with closing thoughts. So we'll let each person share any other observations that they want to make, either about what we saw tonight or what's coming up. I'll start. Then we'll do Meghan, Eric, and Steve. So my closing reaction is I was hoping for a little more from Biden. So Steve, your point about like he didn't make it easy for let's say people who supported Green New Deal to kind of really feel good about voting for him. I was hoping for a little more. And then I think my second observation is I worry a little bit about some of those people that don't like either of them that are going to go third party, and we're going to lose this thing by just a tad, and the whole spoiler effect. And I don't think that's another thing where I don't think Biden really made it easy for people who are kind of fed up with both parties to get on board. I think he was playing not to lose, and maybe in the end that's fine. But hopefully we see a little more from him next time. But that was just my final reactions. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was hoping to see more. I do think we'll see more next time. I do think, the number one issue for folks right now is COVID, when we're going to get a vaccine, what sort of recovery we're going to have. And they want someone with a plan for that. Mm-hmm. And he was the only one on the stage that spoke even anything about having a plan. So I think that was good. But, at the same time, I was hearing from I'm from Mississippi, so friends in Mississippi that were like, Trump's killing this. He's doing such a great job. This is over, like game over. And so it's this kind of, I'm having PTSD again. Like, is everyone just wrong again this year? And we're going to get to November and kind of have that, exhale panic moment once they call Michigan. So, to those voters that are trying to have a protest vote, just don't. You saw how it turned out last time. I think that's the takeaway. But I will look to Biden and certainly Kamala to really beef up the substance. I think to be able to get a word in edgewise, at least more so next time, and to continue to speak directly to the American people and to the issues that they care about, instead of rammering on about starting Big Ten football and not wearing masks.
Well, on my end, and I've been paying attention to, and unlike most comment sections, I actually, care about this one because I know that it's filled with a lot of our former supporters of the Yang campaign. And, something that I've monitored closely is a lot of those comments over social media over the past several months. And, I know that there's a lot of mixed reactions and a lot of mixed feelings. And I'm sure that folks who watch tonight's debate feel one way or the other, or kind of lament where we landed as a party, going from the most diverse candidate slate and then whittling it down to something that we feel like we could have expected was not something that was necessarily an outcome that was desirable by that base. But at the very same time, I feel like if we look at what's happened over the course of the last 4 years, and we see that the harmful effects have really taken effect, we can't afford another term of this. And, outside of the debate performances, we really need to keep that into effect. And as Andrew called this political theater, we'll see more of it. And I hope that we, as Megan put it, don't issue any form of protest vote and really just understand what's at stake here. And for better or worse, our soul of the nation, as the Biden campaign has put it, is really at stake. So, I hope that we keep that focus and mindset as we, course our way through this last 40-something days.
Oh, Steve, are you muted?
There we go. Let's try that. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Biden will be better in the next debate. I think Trump may actually be better as well. So I do believe that we will see higher quality debates relative to this one. That sound you hear is the scraping sound of the bottom of a barrel. That's tonight. And I think that the moderator really matters, and that's generally true in debates. I think that when you're dealing with Donald Trump, it's especially true. I thought Chris Wallace did a nice job. He was pretty assertive, especially when he saw that this was not going to take care of itself. I am genuinely, all C-SPAN jokes aside, I'm actually kind of concerned that, is Mr. Scully going to be ready for a unique experience. This is not Bush Dukakis. This is not Reagan Mondale. This is train wreck Donald Trump making train wreck the strategy. And I do believe that Joe Biden will win the election. And I actually, one thing to keep in mind, maybe a last thing, even though it's about a 7-point lead right now and it's a little closer in the swing states, the reality is it's been a static race. If it moves about 3 points towards Trump, this gets extremely close on election night and does not get decided on election night, which is, I think, very bad for the country in the month of November. But if it moves 2 or 3 points in the direction of Biden, which I think is actually more likely, then this becomes blowout time. And this is somebody who has the ability to win 350 or more electoral votes. And we may actually be able to call this thing at 1 or 2 in the morning on election night. So I still think that is very much in play. And that is the reason to get out there and do whatever you can, I would argue, to help Joe Biden.
I promised I would. That was our last question, but I forgot one for Meghan and one for Steve and Eric. Meghan, are you going to support Yang in 2024?
I keep saying that it's a political eternity between now and November, so it's even more of a political eternity between now and 2024. So I am.
Meghan.
Listen, as I think I showed y'all,
That's all you need to say.
Tom didn't say for what. Tom didn't say for what. You can generally just support Andrew as a person.
Listen, I love the Yang Gang. I feel like y'all are my people, so I can't commit to anything now. I can't commit to really anything tomorrow, but check back with me in 2024.
But you can commit to math, clearly.
I can commit to that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, there you go. We know what that means. We know what that means. All right, now, Eric and Steve, question for you. Will Yang be offered and will he accept a position in the Biden administration if Biden wins?
What do you think, Eric? What do you think?
I think they would be remiss not to include him in the administration. And I think, as Andrew stated when he exited the campaign, being able to see, particularly the most paramount part of his platform, UBI, seen through whatever that amplification would take, whether it's as part of the administration or not, I think he would play a significant role of that. And you're already seeing it given his role in the campaign now on the Small Business Advisory Council. I think it'll probably be amplified in the future as well.
Steve?
I think he will be offered a position, and I think the actual question to ask is whether or not the position will fit what Andrew's passion and mission is. And I don't mean that he'll be hostile in any way about it, but I mean, he's not in this for a title. He never has been. I think that's obvious to anybody that followed him. There's a mission. It's something much bigger than himself. It's part of his, I think, wonderful appeal. And so the opportunity maybe is the better word rather than position. And I do think that he will be offered something, and it may be something that is not a formal cabinet type position, but is something not dissimilar from the small business, along with Hickenlooper, this co-chairmanship of this effort to build a platform for what small business is going to have to do in 2021 post-COVID. Never let a crisis go to waste. And I think that this terrible scourge of COVID-19 does provide us an opportunity to really think about what the economy is doing for the bottom half of the population and what policies can help make sure that we have a legitimate safety net that allows us to be the most pro-entrepreneur society that we've ever been and be a lot more empathetic as a society at the same time. That's Andrew. And I think he's going to have that opportunity, and I do believe Biden will offer it in some form in 2021 because I do think he will win.
I love it. All right. Well, Meghan, Eric, and Steve, thank you for coming on the show. And in that order, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.